What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today it is about time that I brought you an update to Dark Worlds. Now, what has really changed for Dark Worlds? Well, it got one brand new card, not a direct support for Dark Worlds themselves, but it did get one new card that could actually be really useful in the strategy. Now, as a bit of a preview, just so you don't have to wait until right towards the end of the profile, that brand new card is Sandwich Day. So, Sandwich Day is if you have a monster in your graveyard, pay 200 life points to draw a card and then reveal it. Then if it is a monster, apply the effect based on its attribute. If it's an attribute that is not in your graveyard, you get to draw an additional card. If it is an attribute that is in your graveyard, which more times than not it probably will be, you discard a card via effect, which means it will trigger your Dark Worlds, which is insane. But then on top of that as well, is the format has shifted a little bit. Draw went to 2, so it lets you be a little bit more free, but then you still need to respect draw, because draw is one of the biggest issues towards the deck, and then kind of go from there. Now, I've taken Dark Worlds back to its basics, being Dark World Dangers. I just feel that that hybrid is probably the most core component of the way that Dark Worlds want to play, but it doesn't respect draw anywhere near as much as the Fiendsmith or even the Radiant hybrid that I've shown you before. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Diving headfirst into the list, we're going to start off with the staple cards. So that's going to be Free Snow, Unlight of Dark World. I would really hope that 2026 will be the year that we get more Dark World support. That would be amazing to get, but you never know. Then we've got Free Genta, the Gatesman of the Dark World. This one, again, you want to be maxing out on free. The idea is that Genta will get you into your Gate of the Dark World, and then you build on from there. Not to mention the Banish and Revive effect of this card just makes it absolutely insane. Then we have 3 of the newer version of Rainbow Overking of Dark World. And then we do have 2 of the Mac Daddy original Grepher Dragon Lord of Dark World. So the idea is these are your level 8 higher monsters. These are the ones that get to return your lower level monsters from the field back to the hand. So you can use them again as follow-up resource, and then obviously present themselves to the field. Keep in mind that Rainbow can't return Grepher, but Grepher can pretty much return everything. Whereas Rainbow can return pretty much everything apart from Grepher. And then we're playing 1 of the original Rainbow. Now, you don't have to play this. This is just a personal choice of mine. I like the option of being able to get access to colourless. Now, the one thing that I always get when I do a Dark World profile is, why are you not focusing on the hand rip? Like, the win con for Dark World is only the hand rip. No. The win con for Dark World going first is the hand rip. That is doable. But unless you're absolutely 100% guaranteed that you're going to win every single dice roll and go first every single time, and then go, well, I get to go first, I'll blow game 2 and then go first again, and your opponent doesn't interact with you, you need to have plans B, C, D, E, all the way down to Z. Otherwise, where are you going to go? So that's what I like about this deck. This deck gives you so much flexibility, so much creativity. The way I try to build this is, okay, if my opponent has draw, what can I do? If my opponent has draw, how can I stop it? How can I play for it? Where can I go? And then take that into account. If I don't win my dice roll and I don't get to go first, what can I do? Silver is still an effective piece going second, it's just nowhere near as effective. Going into the Grepher Dragon Overlord is still effective, but it's not as good. So I like having the option of threatening a colourless that can either OTK or just clear field so that the rest of my cards can push through. That's my preference, but you can do whatever you want with this deck, which is why I love it so much. Carrying on with the rest of the Dark Worlds, again, gold is another one that I personally like to use. Yes, going first is not that effective, but if I do see it in my opening hand, I'll be able to summon it after I discard it, and then get to loop it back to the hand for resource. What that also then gets me to do is if I've got gold in the hand, I can set up the pop 2 rather than the rip from the hand off of the back of the Grepher Dragon Overlord. So it again gives me more flexibility to disrupt the field that has already been built, and I'm trying to get the balance of, if I go first, silver. If I go second, gold. Then the one that's going to bridge both of these together to make sure that we can always trigger them by being sent via our opponent's card effects is Ceruli. Now, this is another thing that I get quite a few times, so hopefully this is a bit of clarity for everyone that's watching. Ceruli. So if it is discarded to the graveyard by any card effect, danger, as long as it is gone by card effect, you will be able to trigger the effect. Danger, its own effect, another Dark World effect, you are absolutely fine. Then, its secondary effect, you special summon this card from the graveyard to your opponent's side of the field in face-up defense position. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, your opponent, being us, the Dark World player, has to discard a card. Now, It says when it is discarded via a card effect and then summoned via a Dark World effect, including itself. So when it summons itself via its own effect, that still triggers the effect to make us, the Dark World player, discard a card. The only time you'll be able to summon back a Ceruli and then it doesn't trigger to make your opponent discard is if you bring it back with something like Monster Reborn, or if you bring it back with a Muckraker from the Underworld. They will not trigger because they are not Dark World effects. But this one doesn't have that little bit of clause saying except Dark World Ceruli. So you are always going to be clean and clear to trigger its effect 99.999% of the time when you are discarding this off of the back of a Danger, off of the back of any other Dark World effect. Heck, off of the back of Muckraker, if you use its effect to discard it to the graveyard, it's still discarded as card effect and it will still go back to your opponent's side of the field. You just can't revive it with the Muckraker because then it pretty much won't do anything. Moving on to spells, 2 Gate of the Dark World. Again, this is just a preference that I go for. Some players want to play it free. That's absolutely fine. Yes, in a dream scenario, it's absolutely amazing to go Genta, grab you gates, Genta, grab you gates, even if you've hard opened up a copy. But the one thing I didn't like was if I already see Gates of the Dark World in the opening hand, I can only discard Genta once, and I want to be discarding Genta twice. So the idea is that what you're trying to do here is, if you see Gates, it's completely dead if you can't get a Fiend in the graveyard and you don't already have a Fiend in hand, which is again why the Dangers become a little bit more effective for you in this version. But what you're trying to do here with this one is you want to go, you don't want to see Gates. Like, I don't want to see Gates in my hand. That is what I'm aiming to do. If I see it in my hand, yes, of course, my plays are a little bit weaker than if I had 2 left in the deck. But I'd much rather reduce the risk of opening up multiples and reduce the risk of seeing it in the opening hand than play free, because that third copy is not going to do anything for me. If I see 2 in my opening hand, same when playing it at 2, but the ratio or the chances of seeing 2 in your opening hand when you're only playing 2 are a lot lower than if you're playing free. It's just a risk that I am willing to take. If you want to play free, by all means do that. But for me, 2 is what I'm absolutely happy with. Another card that I'm trying out at 2, but I am quite tempted to play Puppetry at 1 as well, is I'm playing 2 a session. Now, the reason I like this one is, again, you're trying to take into account that Drow and Lockbird might be running around. If I hard open up this with the ability to get into the Grepher Dark World, that's going to give me the ability to stop Drow and Lockbird. But it also gives me this ability to make colours during my opponent's turn, and if my opponent tries to stop me getting access to this card, it gives me the ability to do so. It also gives me the ability to not worry about discarding it off of the back of a Danger. Yes, of course, I have its graveyard effect, which is absolutely amazing, but it also means that if I do have its graveyard effect, I go, cool, discard it, and I don't mind seeing it to then be able to trigger off a Dark World effect and add it back to the hand. So playing 2 of this, I'm actually kind of okay with. I've got no major issues with it. And in an ideal scenario, if I do use a Danger and I do discard it and then use this effect to add it back to my hand, I'm probably going to want to use it during my turn, which then means I can't recycle it again. Whereas if I just hard open up another copy or see another copy, I'll be able to do the exact same thing that I want to do. The one Archives, again, this could very easily be Puppetry. I like Puppetry. It's kind of one of these cards that I'm tempted between going in the main or going in the side. And then the other one that I am tempted by, as I get the rest of my Dark World cards to one side, that I'm really considering playing is Charge into a Dark World. Now, you don't have to play Charge into the Dark World. I just like that idea that a little bit later on in the grind game, I can target a level 4 Fiend in the graveyard or lower and special summon it and then discard a Fiend monster. It does require a bit of a setup. It needs the graveyard setup. It needs you to have that Fiend in the hand, but it still gives you that ability to trigger off a Dark World, get you another level 4 to the field, make you an Xyz player of a rank 4, and then build on from there. So that's it for all the Dark World cards. Moving on to the Danger cards, I've gone with 3 Danger Nessie. So this one, the idea is with Dangers, you need to get the balance right for successfully getting its summon effect, but then also making sure you can get most advantage for its discard effect. So the idea with Nessie is all of the Dangers reveal themselves in the hand. You can do that as many times as you have Dangers. That's absolutely fine. They summon themselves if they are not picked by your opponent's card, by your opponent at random, and then they draw you a new card. If the card that is picked gets discarded via card effect, so that triggers off your Dark Worlds, which is great success. Nessie, if it is discarded, lets you add any Dark World Danger card from the deck to the hand except itself. So that's when you're going to want to start digging into cards like your Mothman, Jackalope, Bigfoot for going second, and then Chupacabra for a bit more extension if it does get discarded. Like, you're not banking on these cards to be discarded. You ideally want them to be summoned and draw. But if they do get discarded, you get both players draw a card and discard a card via effect, so you trigger off your Dark World card effects. Jackalope lets you special summon any Danger from the deck, so the idea is I can summon a level 8 to make a rank 8 play, or I can summon a 4 to make a rank 4 play. Now, the idea behind the rank 4 plays is you're going to be going down into Digares, or you're going to be going into a Baguska if you have been hand trapped or hand interacted to with death, and then that's kind of where you're going to build back up on it. Bigfoot, if it is discarded, lets you target a face-up card your opponent tries and destroy it. Chupacabra lets you target a danger in the graveyard, accept itself, and special summon it. And then already mentioned it, Jackala lets you special summon directly from the deck. So you're getting a range of either extending your field or being able to get you your discard effect to then build off the back of that as well. The final card that I really like to play is an Honorary Danger itself in the form of the Salamander Catalyzer. And the reason I like this is it gives you the guarantee ability to choose what you want to discard. So you reveal this card in the hand and a theme monster in your hand, you special summon one of them, and then you discard the other via card effect. So if you want a level 4 on the field to make a rank 4 play, you summon out the Salamander. But then you can also trigger off the discard effects of either your dangers, or you can trigger off the discard effects of your Dark Worlds and then push even further. In the other side, if you really want a level 8 to the field, you have that ability to do that as well. And then you can move into your rank 8 plays, which I'll show you and explain to you once I get to the extra deck, why a rank 8 specifically in this deck is going to be very, very important, especially when you're going first. And then my normal summon of the entire deck. Now, I still think this is the best normal summon that Dark Worlds can play personally, because it makes it very awkward for your opponent. It protects you. If you can keep it on the field, it will give you a disruption during your opponent's turn. It's great for going first or second, because going second, again, it's a normal summon that you're not really going to want to use on any of the other cards in this deck right here, but you get to utilize it, and then it puts your opponent in a position that the first effect they try to use, or the first monster effect, you're going to be able to trade off 1-for-1 with it. And that's going to be your Kokemiru Guardian. Now, the other normal summons of the deck can be stuff like Tour Guide, and can also be stuff like Ken and Gen. Yes, Ken and Gen kind of raise the ceiling, as does Tour Guide, if you feel that you're going to go uninterrupted. But you can't always guarantee that. With more Ceruli running around that your opponent might hold, if they don't hold and they do it during the draw phase, a little bit of a different story, but that's going to happen to pretty much every deck you are trying to play, or every deck you're going to try and face. Furlos, if you feel you're going to burn through your extra deck, you can kind of push for it. And the one thing with it, if you get hit with a Ceruli and a Furlos, specifically in a deck like Dark Worlds, you can actually try and deck them out, because the amount of times you can summon from the hand, especially with the dangers, and the amount of times you can summon from the extra deck by looping cards around is pretty impressive. But the idea behind this one is, if my opponent has Droll, this gives me a blocker to Droll. If my opponent has an Ash and I really want one of my effects to resolve, this gives me the blocker to Ash. If my opponent has an Nibiru, not that the Nibiru is a massive factor, but it can cause you a couple of complications as you're trying to build your field, this gives me the answer to that. As I've already mentioned, because you do play stuff like Skuldred Saruja, you have a higher chance of being able to reveal a second copy of a Kokemiru Guardian in your hand to make sure that it stays on the field, and then during your opponent's turn it becomes another disruption for a monster effect, and you don't even need to worry about utilizing your Dark World Grepher. Again, the idea is if you go first, you protect your hand rip combo plays, and then rip your opponent's hand to pretty much shreds to leave them with one card they're going to top deck, and that card 99% of the time is going to get answered or changed with your Grepher Dark Lord. More times than not, if your opponent gets looped for 4 to 5 cards, they're pretty much going to scoop it up and pass it over anyway to game 2. But the idea is being able to play Kokemiru Guardian in the main deck gives you that ability of going first and second. Whereas when you look at Tour Guide and Ken and Gens and Tour Guides both open themselves up to being hit with an Ash Blossom. They get open up to hit with a Veilers, with an Imperms. Yes, this can be hit with Veilers and Imperms, but then when they do something like that, you're kind of then telegraphing that they're trying to hit this card with an Imperm or a Veiler, because they might have something else like a Nibiru to play up, and you can play around it a little bit better. Also remember that when you give your opponent your Ceruli, straight away that shuts off their Imperms. So it makes it very, very awkward for them to kind of then navigate from that point on. And again, you put them in a position where it's like, you have to use your Imperm now, otherwise you're not going to be able to. Yes, of course, the Ken and Gen combo will do that exact same thing for you, but again, the chances are if your opponent has an Imperm or an interaction at that particular point, they're going to hit you with it. The Ken, Gen, and Tour Guide do not really play through Nibiru. They don't really play through a Droll Lockbird. The best thing that Tour Guide can do is that Tour Guide summon out at level 3, overlay both of those into a Gossip Shadow, and that gives you your answer to Nibiru or gives you your answer to Droll. But again, it's something that you can do already with your Kokemiru Guardian and not need to worry about the fact that an Ash could hit it or anything else from that point on. Another benefit with the Kokemiru Guardian over those other two optional normal summon choices is it's a level 4. So if I get to the end of my combo and I've now rebuilt my ability to protect from the Nibiru, or I've already looked to my opponent's hand, or I've ripped my opponent's hand apart, you then get that ability to go, cool, overlay these, and then you go into Baguzga, you can go into Daguerres. You could, of course, use it as link material, but you can use the others as link material as well. So I'm just giving you the absolute uniquenesses that the Kokemiru Guardian has. Not to mention, again, going second, as I've already mentioned, you start off with Tour Guide 99.999% of the time. That gets interacted with by your opponent's field. The exact same can be said for Ken and Gen, whereas with Kokemiru Guardian, you're not really activating an effect right then and there. And it kind of forces your opponent that if they want to activate an effect, they're going to have to activate 2 effects for your 1 effect. Because you would start off with, they activate an effect in response to what you're trying to do, you use Kokumiru Guardian to protect that effect you want to resolve, and then your opponent then has to respond to negate your Kokumiru Guardian. And the only way they do that when this tributes this off as cost is if they have like a Call by the Grave, and that's very, very slim with them only being able to have 1 copy, or they then need to have an Omni Negate that they have to burn for the Kokumiru Guardian. Moving on to the final monster of the deck is the one Yugioh the Dawn's Light with the 1 Mutiny in the Sky. Now again, these are completely optional. You have a lot of flex spot in this deck if you wanted to, but the idea behind both of these is they have effects in the graveyard that let you recycle them should you discard, and then it gives you a little bit more benefits. So the Yugioh is if it is discarded via card effect, or sent to the graveyard in general, sorry, you get to add a Mutiny in the Sky from the deck to the hand. Mutiny in the Sky is if it is in the graveyard, you get to send a Fiend monster, send a Fiend or Fairy monster from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard to add this card back to the hand. And this one lets you fusion summon any Fiend or Fairy monster from your extra deck by shuffling monster, Fiend and or Fairies from the graveyard back into the deck. So it actually lets you recycle your Dark World cards and then you get to go again. So even more reason, if you can't get silver back off the graveyard back to the field, you just recycle it and then search it out later on. So you're still going to be in a very, very good position. And then the final cards of the deck, we are going to be playing 2 Trill Tactics Thrust. And the idea behind Trill Tactics Thrust is going second, it can act as another route to Mutiny in the Sky. It can also act as a route to get you into Triple Tactic Talents, which could be great for going first or second, because if you go first, you look at your opponent's hand 99.999% of the time, you get rid of one of their last cards, and then when you're resolving silver, remember it has to send back exactly 2 cards. So the idea is that if you do silver first, they're going to put back their weakest cards in their entire hand. Then you use Triple Tactics Talents because you've given them Ceruli, and Ceruli is your opponent activating that effect. It's a mandatory, they have to, they've got no option. And then you get to go, cool, you control a monster, I'm going to use Thrust to grab me talents, I'm going to activate talents, I'm going to look at the last 3 cards that you specifically left in your hand and go, hey, that's a nice Nibiru, I can't protect from it, this going back. And then you do silver again, and then straight away they have nothing left. And then what else your Trill Tactics Thrust can get you is it can turn a card that is currently limited in the TCG to being able to play 2 to 3 copies of it, being in the form of Card of Destruction. Now, obviously, this doesn't copy the effect, but the idea is I have more consistency to get to a card like Card of Demise. Card of Destruction. Then we do have the 1 Dark Corridor. Like, everything about this card is Dark World, but they specifically left out the fact that it either says Dark World in the name or it's always treated as a Dark World card, otherwise you'd just be able to search it as easily as you possibly wanted to. Now, the reason I only play this at 1, and I know a lot of people again are like, why would you not play it at multiples? You want to see this card. Yeah, true, you do want to see this card, but because of the way that the game currently goes, not only do you force your opponent to play into a Trill Tactics Thrust, and more times than not, they can also just naturally play into it themselves, but you also have ways to get to it in other different, directly through the Trill Tactics Thrust, but then in place of playing a second one, as it is a hard once per turn, you might as well play a Sandwich Day, which can do relatively the same of what you're trying to do. So this one will directly add you a Dark World card from the deck to the hand and then discard a card via effect. This one will technically just draw you a random card and then more times than not force you to discard via card effect. So it's doing the exact same job, just not a direct search. And rather than clogging myself down with multiples of this card or multiples of this card, I'm able to play 1 and 1 and then technically treat it as a free or a free. So you're getting a lot more consistency here. Yes, of course, you could argue that Trill Tactics Thrust is also a hard once per turn. But again, the big benefit of being able to see multiple thrusts or just being able to get to Trill Tactics Thrust as early as you can is that Thrust can become any of these 4 cards here. Whereas if I see 2 corridors, it's only ever going to be corridor that I can't use. So your Trill Tactics Thrust can become any of these cards, and then it also opens up the side deck as well a little bit more for you. So if you wanted to play something like a different Dimension Ground, if you wanted to play Eradicator Virus because you have a lot of high-level Dark monsters, heck, if you wanted to try and get more quicker, easier access to one of the anti-meta-ish cards against Radiant Typhoons, you could even grab yourself a Magic Deflector. So it means that rather than having to clog your extra deck down, or sorry, your side deck down with multiple like normal spells or trap cards, you can play a lot less because you're already main decking a Trill Tactics Thrust, which I still think is pretty decent for this current game state and current meta, and you just have a little bit more benefits from it because you can trigger it off turn 0 without even needing to rely on your opponent. So that's it for the entire main deck. Now to show you the extra deck. Again, quite like the main deck, there's a lot of flexibility with your extra deck depending on the route you want to take it. You could open up the door to more link routes if you wanted to. You could cut out your colorless. I've already shown you a Fiendsmith version of the deck, a Radiant Typhoon version of the deck. There's a lot of different variations you could use with this, and you really just choose the one that fits your playstyle the best. So for the extra deck, we play 3 fusions. One being your colorless, which is your aggressor, one being Greffa, which is your defender, and then one being Loose the Dusk Dark, which basically gives you a little bit of protection and a bit more disruption. Now, more times than not, you're going first, you're going for Greffa, going second, you're going here for the colorless, but you can get both of these off of the back of a session, and then you can get this off of the back of Mutiny. But Mutiny can also get you these two as well, so you've got a lot of consistency to get to either of these pieces. For the XEs, we're playing the 1 Superstar Slayer Typhon. Now remember, with Gates of the Dark World in play, it will make this stronger, which is great because it plays past Zeus, but it also negates its own effect to detach material to return. It doesn't negate its effect to blanket negate anything that is 3000 attack or more, but it's still a very, very powerful boss monster. And then when you're putting it up against stuff like the Murakumos, which are basically stronger than the baseline of 2900, with Gates of the Dark World, you actually have more of a benefit because this makes it a lot harder to deal with. 1 Baguska, as I've already mentioned, this is if you get interacted with to death. The other benefits of Quackimiri Guardian, as I mentioned, is you just go normal summon down Quackimiri Guardian, get an extender, whether that be a Danger Mothman, whether that be a Chupacabra, whether that be a Jackalope that gets you that level 4 monster on the field, whether that be the Mothman or Chupacabra, overlay both of those, go into Baguska and hope that's enough to push you through. Remember, to get to Baguska, or by the time you try to make that play for Baguska, you would have had to been interacted to like crazy. And I'm talking like a Perulia and you want to try and play under it, a Draw and Lock Bird, an Imperm that is really, really disrupts your plays. Like multiple interactions would have had to been used for you to resort to a Baguska. Then got the 1 Duguerres, the Timeless. The benefit of this one is you draw cards and then discard via effects, and you're probably going to want to do that all the time. And then the 1 rank A that I think is incredibly important for the deck is the 1 number 1 Infection Buzz King. Now, the reason this is so important for the deck is going first, if you can't complete the hand rip, this is an option for you. And the reason that this is quite a good option for you is because a lot of decks right now play a lot of one-offs that are incredibly powerful. So, Snatchy Yummy, for example. If you're going second against Yummies, you get to look at their extra deck, you rip away the Snatchy, that's it, they can't really play. It also means you can directly out those Dragoon engines, because you can either hit the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which is probably what you're going to want to do more times than not, because you don't really want them going gaze and then being able to play back or recycle back the Dark Magician Destruction. But we should have the Dark Magician Destruction as an option as well. And then you look at the Radiants, less so being able to hit their Link 2s, but their Radiant extra is a little bit more flexible, so you're probably not going to want to directly go for this against them. But it also has that very nice effect of being able to utilize it if you don't know what your opponent's playing. So again, if they've interacted with you like mad, you can take an educated guess of, right, well, they play a lot of non-engine. Let's see exactly what they're playing. Look for the extra deck. Worst case scenario, you take away an SP Little Knight. Best case scenario, you go, oh, you're on that. Let's take away that core component, and then they start to struggle a little bit more in game or like during their turn. Then for the links, I'm on the 1 Cross Sheep. This can just help you push your plays further a little bit forward. Because we're playing 3 different fusion monsters, all you need to do is fuse or summon to a zone this card points to while it points to a fusion, and it will trigger to revive a level 4 or lower from the graveyard, and that'll get you a Dark World back, and then those Dark World can start coming back to the hand if you've got Greffa and Rainbow in the graveyard. 1 Akashic Magician. This is my personal preference for being able to return the Ceruli from my opponent's field back to my hand. Is I make the Akashic Magician, this would then return the Ceruli, and the best thing is, as long as you put it in front of the extra monster zone and you put a danger in the bottom of your extra monster zone, you make the Akashic will bounce both of those 2 back to the hand, and that's how you can resolve your Ceruli again, while also getting back a danger to the hand, so you've got another way of being able to reveal and discard. The 1 Muckraker from the Underworld, again, this is just incredibly important for the whole strategy. The fact that it discards via card effect, which is really important to trigger off your Dark Worlds. Yes, it can't be used as link material the turn that it's summoned, but being able to do that and revive a Dark World means that you can either loop back a silver back to the hand, but as I've already mentioned, you can very easily go discard a Ceruli, put the Ceruli to your opponent's side of the field because it's discarded via any card effect, and then it summons itself via its own effect, then makes you drop another card from the hand, and that can be more to help you push. That could be that you've already added the silver back to the hand, and this is the final 2 cards for the nail in the coffin for your opponent to just pass turn or just scoop it up and go to game 2. For the higher links, we've got the 1 Saruja Skuldred. The other is that as you're pushing your plays further forward, if you're like, right, I want to complete the hand rip, I need to see a True Tactics Thrust or a Talent or anything else like that, Skuldred can help you get to it. And that's really what you're trying to do with this one. Then got the 1 Abawa Q, the Lightless Shadow. So as long as you use this or go into this with a Fiend monster, the other is that this is going to add you another line of disruption, so it gives you another alternative. Whether you want to bring a Fiend back from the grave, but more times than not you can use its discard effect to destroy, can be very, very important. The discard, unfortunately, will not trigger your Dark Worlds, but it will give you that ability to just disrupt your opponent and can be very useful for you. So then we've got the IP Masquerena. Now the IP Masquerena can be very useful for you because this can work you into stuff like your About queue with the right Fiend monster. Not that you want to be using it for that, but that is an option you could do. The card you're going to use your IP Masquerena to get you into 99% of the time is going to be the SP Little Knight, which is the best target you can possibly go for because you're turning an IP Masquerena into a banish technically 2 more times than not. You could go for the Gorgon of Xelophenia if you wanted to as well, which could be a nice like attack stopper. But the card that I like to go to right now in this format, just because of the amount of stuff we've got floating around in the form of like either just insanely powerful tower monsters or just you can't touch this style monster, is going to be the Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. So when you're looking at cards like Dragoon, when you're looking at cards like Liger Dancer, what will happen more times than not is that with a deck like this, if you resolve correctly, more times than not, your opponent is not going to Dragoon your danger. Your opponent is probably not going to Liger Dance when you've got 4 monsters on the field and you still have 4 more cards in the hand and you haven't conducted a normal summon. They might be like, right, okay, cool, well, where are you going to go? And then once you start to produce a Link summon, they're going to be like, oh, okay, cool, you're going for a Link 4. And you're like, no, I'm going to use your Liger Dancer or I'm going to use your Dragoon. Now, of course, that trick will only happen once, but even then, remember, once you get those 4 monsters on the field, you're still going to have 4 more cards to play with. So even if they Liger Dancer and clear that field off, you go, okay, cool. Extend, 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 and then you could do the Liger Dancer Link off again just to get rid of it. So you still have loads of different ways to deal with that card, and again, as I've already mentioned, it's just to give you those contingencies so you have those options to deal with cards like that, so you don't just go, cool, Liger Dancer, I lose, scoop, go game 2. You want to be able to have loads of different variations you can try out so that you can have loads of different ways to out certain boards like that. And keeping in mind that variety of Yu-Gi-Oh right now, there's a lot you need to be fearful of in regards to stuff like Dragoon, because Dragoon can be a very big pain in the backside, not being able to be targeted and then not also being able to be destroyed by card effect and then making itself like 4k or 5k every time it discards and negates. So you have loads of different ways to build up and then out that card. Yes, there are other ways to make your card stronger to do so, but why do that when you can just use theirs as link material and then still continue to build your field with those remaining cards in your hand. So that's pretty much it for the entire profile. Like I said, it's not a massive like constructural change. Like I haven't changed a huge amount. Like more times than not, unless Dark World are going to get some brand new cards, it's pretty much going to stay the same lineup. And with the current day and age, I can't see Silver ever being replaced right now. I can't see Ceruli being replaced. Maybe a modernized version of Greffa, but even then what Greffa does is still incredibly powerful and very, very useful. So the only real update of the deck as a card, new card being added, is Sandwich Day, and I think it's worth grabbing those. But then also just a Theorycraft update in regards to how this deck wants to approach the current list, the current format, and everything else in between. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Any questions at all, by all means, please put in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.